Hey guys, so today you and I are going to talk about agile processes and scaling and challenges. So let's get into it. So the question in question was, Frederick, what are the main challenges when scaling up an agile work process? And the short answer is people, my friend, and scheduling or collaboration, let's call it that. Let me explain. So usually when you start working in an agile fashion, you will find that you will find that there's a certain work structure that you need to get accustomed to. Like if you're like a company that hasn't been working in an agile fashion, you are going to have to find your way a little bit. But usually the first step in an agile work process is a little bit of a learning curve, because if you are traditionally accustomed to working in a kind of ad hoc fashion, you don't really have any processes or anything like that, that's going to be your main, like the first challenge, just to introduce a process of some sort. You might start out with something simple. You might start out with a stand-up where you synchronize or something like that. You may start adding a Kanban board or something like that so that you can start tracking work or things of this nature. And you might start working towards there's usually a sweet spot. Not everybody goes like full Scrum or like all the way to the to the deepest depths of what agile what it means basically. Everybody kind of finds their own way. Some people think that you should be working in sprints, and some people don't think that you should be working in sprints. You kind of find your way. Usually what I see is that the sweet spot for most companies who are just adopting an agile work practice is that they start out with having a process for synchronizing their team members, such as a stand-up, which is just a morning meeting where you kind of talk about what you did yesterday, what you're going to do today, if you need some help or things of this nature. And they might add a Kanban board or at least story tracking or issue tracking, so that they know that, all right, this person's working on that story, and then we groom that story, which basically means that we prepare a piece of work and then we represent that with a card or something like that, because it just makes it much easier to know where in the process of delivery you actually are. Because usually there is a life cycle to delivering software, which usually starts out with undefined story that needs an estimation, or like how long is this piece of work going to take. And then you prepare that story that goes into ready for work so that you can actually start working on it. The developers work on it, then it goes through different phases such as code reviews, testing, acceptance testing. You kind of find your own way there. But that's usually the first step, which is a challenge, absolutely, for quite a lot of people. And I'm not saying that you need a Scrum Master or something like that. I don't think you have to go that far, but you will be able to do this with at least one experienced developer who has done this before. It's not a very complicated thing to set up a basic agile process for your team if you have someone who's just kind of been used to working in that fashion. But when you're then going to scale this thing up, when you're actually adopting more people into your team and you're actually growing the team, you will start to find that there's a little bit of a pain situation going on here. And this is that organic thing that I've been talking about in a few other videos, about where some people ask me about microservices and so on, like why is it everybody using microservices? Because usually in the beginning you want to start with a monolithic application, depending on your situation of course, but it's very common that you do that. And then you're going to reach a pain point. And that pain point is actually found not usually in the code, it is actually found at the human level, the developers. So your agile team is going to grow to a point where now you have maybe, well, I'm just going to pick the most common number. People say that it's how many people can share two large pizzas together, which is usually around 8 people. So around 8 people, can be less, can be more. You'll start to notice that, yeah, it's kind of getting a little bit awkward that everybody's standing, like that many people are just standing every morning together, and it's kind of awkward that for the product owner or the product manager, or if you have something like a tech lead or something like that, to manage all these 8 people and make sure that they're all synchronized. And it's going to be hard for you to, depending on your responsibility area, of course, to find suitable stories and make sure that nobody's getting in the way of anybody else. Because usually what happens when you have that many people is that you can pretty much, depending on what feature you're working on, put everybody to work at the same time. The problem is that in software development, you may not know this, but it's not possible to just add people to a problem, because some problems are fundamentally only capable of being solved by a certain amount of people. It's very similar to stating that it doesn't matter if you have 300 people, you can't have them all milk the same cow at the same time. It's not going to be efficient because they can't all reach, they can't all get to the cow, or they can't nail into a piece of wood. Like, it's not possible. You can only have so many people, right? So what you're going to have to do is that you're going to have to somehow put all of these people into a region of the code, or work on features that are not like overlapping, so they don't get in each other's way. And this is where the next part of this comes, which is the scaling issue most people find. Where do you draw the line? How do you split this? And that's the key thing here, splitting the team. So when you are working and when you're developing systems, it is vital for you to, as the architect or the PO or whoever you are, to already in the beginning of things, when you're actually noticing that you are actually growing the company, think about like the long-term vision here. Okay, so if I'm going to split this system, let's say for the sake of argument, I'm going to create a split within the code base and within the features of my system. How would I make that split as efficient as possible? What region or what area of responsibility can I allocate to a new group of people if I were to have, let's say, you can play the game, if I had double the amount of people that I have today, what would they be doing? Because they can't all be doing the same thing, most likely. I have to create a responsibility area. And that is the main challenge, to do a good split. And the reason why this is the main challenge is because one part is the social aspect. Now you're going to have to make a decision. People that may have been working together, like they're now going to go into separate teams, and like you're going to distance and it's almost like a bit of separation type of thing going on here. So now you're going to split these people. They may not like this might cause situations, etc., etc. And you're going to have an opinion. Are you going to create one team of like senior experiences, or one team with mixed people with a few juniors or a few seniors, or how are you going to split it? That's a very big challenge. Like, how do you do that at the social level, but also at the code level? Because if you make the split incorrectly, you might find that you're not actually going to get all that much autonomy out of your teams. Because if, let's say that for the sake of argument, that team A has a lot of dependencies to team B, well, then team B is always in a situation where they are always delaying team A, and team A is always being delayed by team B, and it might cause frustration, it might just cause delays. So how do you split the code? It's also a very, very hard thing to actually do when you're scaling up that agile work process, because you're basically going to have two independent teams. They might need to collaborate, but in essence, they're not going to work all that closely anymore. Now, the tips that I can give you on this is that, number one, when it comes to splitting at the social level, just what team is going to do what, you're going to have to consider, if you want one team of people who have been working the longest together and probably are the most stable in terms of delivery speed and things of this nature. So that's what I call like the powerhouse, or like the stable team, the senior team. And then you can have the junior team or the underdog team, which usually consists of people who are a little bit younger in the company. They might have been the most recent hires, and you could let them create their own team. Now, the benefit of this sort of structure is that you now have one team that is very dependable, that you can give all the current ongoing high-stake projects to, and then you have a new team that can start finding their own identity. They don't have to get like polluted, or like they can become their own, they can get their own area, which is a very nice thing if you're just scaling up the company with and you want to add new features or something like that, because that's a new area of development for your company. So it's a very useful thing to have even though they might be for quite some time delivering at a slower pace, it's actually it's going to grow a lot of commitment to the company if you allow a fresh team to just find their own way. So that's one split. But let's say for the sake of argument that you're not actually developing some set of new features, because if it's new features, it's basically a greenfield project. That's a very good thing. But let's say that you have very complicated features, such as a very complicated already existing system, then it might not be the best thing in the world to create a team of just completely fresh hires who don't really have any understanding of how all this complexity works. Then you might have to place a few of the senior developers into that team, or mix it 50-50. It depends a little bit on your preferences, but these things I've found to be the two main situations where you want to consider this. One is, all right, we have a greenfield project, and it's fairly safe to split split on a junior and a senior team. But if it's very complicated, you might need to mix it a little bit. The second part would be pretty much that at the code level, you want to go for the lowest amount of contact surface. So ideally what you want is to split your code in such a way so that one team owns a set of features. You want them to own the whole delivery process, if at all possible. If you split the codes in such a way that one team can pretty much always deliver all the features that they have responsibility for without having to synchronize with the other team, then the split is really, really good. So what I want you to take away from this is that the main challenges when you're scaling up an agile work process is, number one, just if you're starting from scratch, to just introduce the daily processes. You might have people who are kind of used to working in an ad hoc fashion, and they don't really do teamwork all that well. So just getting people on board with doing stand-ups or Kanban boards, or like having some type of process, is going to be the first step. This is usually not that complicated if you have people who are open-minded to this sort of thing. The second thing is that, all right, now your company is growing. Now you have too many people in the same team. You need to actually split the teams. You can't actually just keep everybody on the same code base. Now you need to ask yourself, okay, how am I going to split it at the social level? Like, how am I going to group people? What area of responsibility am I going to put people on? And the second thing is, okay, how am I going to split the code? You can still keep the code in the same code base as a monolithic application, but it's a very good idea to start separating these things, because otherwise your teams are going to get in each other's way, and they might cause dependencies between each other, and then you're going to lose a lot of the value of autonomous teams. And that's what you want. Otherwise, you're not going to see as much of a return on investment and development speed as you would have if you did this correctly. Have a great day.